Hello and welcome to Photosynthesis Part 1. Hang on to your hats, it's going to get good. All right, let's begin with some basics. First of all, the difference between autotrophs and heterotrophs. Auto, as we all know, means self, and troph means feeding. So autotrophs are organisms that produce their own food. Now, I don't mean like go in the kitchen and cook it. I mean they make it within themselves. All right. And so there's different types of autotrophs. You can have, we think of plants and we think of things that are green, but they're not always green. This brown algae is brown. There's different pigments, and you're going to see that. There's different pigments that will pick up and be able to photosynthesize. So you got brown, you have phytoplankton. You can see that there's green in here, phyto meaning light. So plankton can photosynthesize. They're self-feeders. They're going to make their own food. Different types of bacteria. Not all bacteria are autotrophs, but there's different bacteria that are autotrophs. All right, then we have heterotrophs. These are organisms that have to consume their food. So whether that's living or dead, they have to get it from somewhere else because they're not making it. And hetero, just the prefix hetero, means other. So auto is self, and hetero, it's got to get its food from some other source. Fungus is an example of that. Mushrooms and other kind of funguses, they will get their food from somewhere else. They're not producing their own. Okay, so since we're talking about autotrophs, let's look at the actual structure of the leaf. And so here's an actual leaf, and you can see this cut out right here. This is what's blown up. There's things called stomata on the other underside of the leaf. And those are openings so that gases can be exchanged. Carbon dioxide is going to go in here, which you're going to see is very important in the process of photosynthesis. It's critical. And then oxygen is going to be released from here, okay? So that's going to happen in the stomata. If we take one little section here of what's called the mesophyll, that's this middle section. So if we take this little cutout and we blow it up, that's what a mesophyll cell looks like. And it's got a bunch of these chloroplasts inside. That's where all the green is coming from. If we blow up just one of those chloroplasts, this is what it looks like. I like to refer to it as a peppermint patty because it kind of has that shape, and peppermint patties are delicious. And so here, this whole thing, one whole big green thing, is called a thylakoid. And then a stack of them. So you're going to have a whole, the whole thing is called the chloroplast. What did I say, a thylakoid? What in the world am I thinking? All right, so one individual pancake looking structure within the chloroplast is called a thylakoid, and the whole stack of them, like a whole stack of pancakes, are called a grana. Okay, so we have the outer membrane of the chloroplast, the inner membrane of the chloroplast. All of these play a role in photosynthesis, so make sure you know the structures. Outer membrane, inner membrane, thylakoid, whole stack is grana, and then in between the stacks, you have this watery space, and that's called the stroma. All right, so let's look at a little bit here. So here's our chloroplast. One of these is the thylakoid. The whole stack is called grana, and then in between all of the watery space here is the stroma. Now, the reason why we see green when we look at it is because green is being reflected, so that's what we're able to see. Other colors, you can see all the other colors of the rainbow or of the spectrum, not of the rainbow, but of the spectrum, they're being absorbed, and you're going to see how they're used within this site. But the chloroplast, is the site of photosynthesis. Okay, so this is the site of the light reaction of photosynthesis. Okay, now the primary purpose of what's going on in here is to produce ATP and NADPH. So these two, we already know, we've heard this many times at this point, that ATP is an energy molecule. Well, now we have another one, NADPH. So the ATP and NADPH, let me pull this picture up and you'll see ATP and NADPH, they're kind of like two different batteries. Both of these, well, all of these are different, but if we were talking about just the 9 volt um, and the double A over here, or the C's, they both produce energy, but different amounts. All right. And they have different jobs. You're going to use this in like your your smoke alarm that goes off in the middle of the night, and you're going to use this in your flashlight in order to be able to find your smoke alarm and turn it off in the middle of the night. Hey, that's pretty good. All right, let me see, where am I? Okay, let's go back over here. All right, so now this slide's going to be very important. You're going to become very familiar with this. So during photosynthesis, in the light reaction of photosynthesis, this part right here, look at, here's our grana, our stacks of thylakoids. Here's where we're making the batteries called ATP and NADPH. This is where we're making energy. Now remember, we said we couldn't use the energy. It's not usable energy yet. It's stored energy, okay? So in the equation of photosynthesis, water is one of the reactants. Well, water is used during the light reactions, and it's going to produce oxygen. Okay, so water goes in, oxygen's going to come out from the light reactions. We have to use sunlight. That's why they're called light reactions. You have to have sunlight for this reaction to take place. All right, and we're going to produce ATP and NADPH. Now, we're going to roll into the Calvin cycle. All right, the Calvin cycle is called the light independent reactions. And this is where we're going to use the CO2 portion of our formula to make sugar, to make glucose. Okay, we're going to use CO2 and the ATP and the NADPH that we got from the light reactions. They're going to go into the Calvin cycle, and we're going to use the CO2. It's going to go through a bunch of different changes. We're going to come out with glucose, and then it's going to cycle back in. Notice ADP, because ATP, that bond has been broken, energy used from here, and the bond here in NADPH has been broken, and we end up with NADP+. All right? And then they all get cycled back through. Become very familiar with this. In fact, I want you to draw this in your notes, because this is a critical diagram. All right, now the photosynthesis chemical reaction. Here is the equation. I want you to draw this too. You have to know this. You have to know it balanced. So you have carbon dioxide plus water. These are your reactants. You must have sunlight for this reaction to take place. We're going to end up with glucose and oxygen, and heat is given off, of course, because we have broken bonds. All right, and then the balanced equation is 6 CO2 plus 6 waters is going to give us glucose plus 6 O2 and heat. Okay, so the water splits using the sunlight energy, not the CO2, because if we look back here, water is split in the light reactions. So light is not used in the light independent reactions. CO2, you want to know CO2 in the light independent, water in the light reactions. Okay? All right. Now, when we look at, oh, let me go back here real quick. Sorry. All right. So when we're looking at over here, ATP, when it goes into the light independent reactions, you can see that ADP is going to come out of it, and then this inorganic phosphate, of course, because that has been that bond has been broken. So this ADP, when it goes back over here, it's going to be phosphorylated to make ATP. Phosphorylated is a fancy word for saying that phosphate group is added back on. And this is going to require energy. Remember we said it takes energy to put this back on. Where are they going to come from? They're going to come from electrons, free electrons from the electron transport chain. All right, now, so we talked about the visible spectrum. We see green because that's reflected, and then here's the rest of the visible spectrum. Red is over here in the longer wavelength, and then we have the blue, the purple and the blues going in the shorter wavelengths. So sunlight is actually traveling in waves, and they have these different wavelengths. The red has the least energy of what's called white light. It has the least, see how it has lower energy, and the shorter wavelengths have the higher energy. All right, now if we look here, this, we can use what's called a spectrophotometer, and that spectrophotometer is going to measure the light waves that are not absorbed by a specimen. So the visible spectrum, the white light, the Roy G. Biv, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, those are the colors within the visible spectrum. And light itself travels in units of energy called photons. Let me see if this, no, it's not showing it. I think it's coming up. And so it travels in energy units called photons. And you have this absorption versus reflection. So the absorption are colors that are usable light energy. So when we talk about colors that are absorbed, that's all the colors in the spectrum. The reflected ones are not usable, okay? So keep that in mind. What we see is green. It's not usable energy. The green light is reflected back to our eyes, but we're not using it. The absorbed light, the plants are going to use the reds and the blues because they are going to have differing amount of energies that's needed for the different reactions to take place. So here's an absorption spectrum. And again, this is where absorption is where the work is being done. You can see we have chlorophyll A, B, something called carotenoids, and all of these are present. We see green, but all these other colors are present, which is why in the fall we start seeing other colors, because there's less, as the temperature changes and the amount of light changes, it's signaling the plants, the deciduous plants that are going to lose their leaves, it's signaling to them to decrease the amount of chlorophyll production. When that happens, then the plant, the chlorophyll reduces, chlorophyll's green, and now all these other colors that are available, all these other carotenoids, the reds and the yellows and all these other colors, we're now able to see, because the chlorophyll molecules will mask and cover these during the regular season. All right, let's stop there, and then we're going to pick up with photosystems.